So this track is going to be on the business of games, and will be followed by a keynote presentation about why experts are always wrong by Tom Kalinske. So let me introduce the panelists. My name is Shannon Clark. I'm a serial entrepreneur and longtime gamer. So on this panel, we have three panelists. We have Brian Chu, who's the director of product at Rocket Games. They make mobile casino games. In the past, he was at Blizzard, where he worked on Heroes of the Storm and StarCraft, and at Zynga, he worked on Cityville. We have Taehoon Kim, who's the CEO of nWay. They recently made and launched just a month ago the Power Rangers Legacy Wars game on all mobile devices. Before that, they launched the Chronoblade game. He's also built multiple other game companies, including MMOs and virtual worlds. And at the end there is Wright, Bagwell, who's the CEO of Outpost games. They're making a game that's going to launch in the future, which will make every gamer a performer. He worked on Farmville at Zynga. He was the creative director on the Dead Space series of games, and before that he worked at EA and Valve. So let me start with asking everyone to give a little introduction about what their company does beyond what I just said, and talk a little bit about how they got here today. So Brian?
So I started, right now I'm at Rocket Games. We mainly focus on mobile casino games. We were recently acquired by Penn National, a large casino gaming operator that owns a number of different land-based casinos all around the country, most mainly on the East Coast. Before that, I was at Blizzard Entertainment, where I worked on StarCraft II, Legacy of the Void, Hearthstone, and Heroes of the Storm. That's about it.
Yeah, I'm a CEO and co-founder of nWay Games. We started in 2011 with the goal of creating console-quality multiplayer games for emerging platforms at the time, which were mobile, smart TV, and browsers. So we created Chronoblade and Power Rangers game, both games which are synchronous multiplayer fighting games. Before that, I was a founder of Nurian Software, which created Second Life-like virtual worlds, but using Unreal Engine and very highly realistic. Before that, I was at Real Time Worlds, where we did games like Crackdown and APB, and similar to like Grand Theft Auto Online. And APB is still alive right now. Before that, I was a product manager for game smartphones at Samsung Electronics. Thank you.
I'm Wright, Bagwell, and at Outpost Games, what we're doing is we're building a platform that is enabling games to really have every player who plays them feel like a performer, and to have every game feel like a performance. And we're doing that by having basically letting developers build audience presence directly into their games. And we're trying to showcase the platform by building a game that we hope will sort of be the killer app and showcase it. That's kind of a mashup of reality TV and video games. Before Outpost, I was a creative director or design director at Zynga on the Farmville franchise. I worked on the Dead Space series at EA, where I was the creative director. Worked on a bunch of the James Bond games they made over the years there, as well as a designer. Was a designer at Valve for a brief period of time, and spent a little bit of time at a small company called Cave Dog. And what got me into games is, if anybody remembers Quake from the late 90s, I worked on Quake as sort of a hobbyist, just making mods and levels. And I found it to be so much fun that I decided to drop out of graduate school to go pursue a career in games.
Okay, so let me ask all of you, with your current games, did you find the audience first, or did you design the game first and then figure out the audience? So talk a little bit about how that then translates into the business model that you're following.
So for Rocket, the audience is pretty well defined because our audience we see every day. If you go to Las Vegas or any casino around the country, you kind of know who your players are. So it's much easier to really design for that audience. By the same token, it's also much easier to our development cycles are much shorter, so we can test a lot of different iterations of product and figure out what works and what doesn't for that specific audience.
And the audience that we went after are basically console and PC core gamers, someone like that is myself, who play console and PC, but also I wanted to be able to play games like that throughout the day, on the go, on mobile or on my browser. And so I wanted to make those kind of games more hyper accessible for the same audience, and that's how we got started. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, what we did is we decided that we looked at the phenomenon of people watching video games and realized that phenomenon is getting so large that there are almost just as many people watching video games as there are playing now. So what we began with is saying that, hey, we wanted to target people who think of games as an opportunity to perform, to put on a show. And we wanted to think of people who watch character drama as potentially our customers as well. So for us, we sort of had these two audiences that we wanted to attract to what we're doing.
So talk a little bit about the business model that you're picking for your games. So are these things that you pay once? Are these things you subscribe to? Are these free to play and somehow they make money? Can you explain that for an audience of people who may or may not know how these business models work today? You want to start, right?
Yeah, the other way.
Sure. For us, we ultimately are thinking of ourselves as a platform company. And the platform that we're building is really focused on thinking about how do we start to monetize viewer participation or spectator participation in games. So rather than thinking about players as consumers of content, we view players as creators of content that will attract large audiences. So it's for us, there's a huge opportunity for innovation and thinking about all the different ways that you could monetize audience participation and presence in games. And it's the stuff that we're doing is, I think, the stuff that no one has really done before. On the other hand, because we are also building a game to showcase this platform, we're trying to keep the business model really simple for that game. It'll be modestly priced, a game that you pay for once and you own, and you can perform in that game for the rest of time. So that model works really, really well when you want to sort of launch the game and then make your life pretty simple by not having to maintain a sort of complex economy around it. So our focus will be on the platform going forward and thinking about how to monetize viewers.
So our game is a free-to-play game with in-app purchases, and it fits very well with the type of game that we are developing, because our game centers around real-time competitive play and kind of desire for players to want to continue win and go up the ladder. And so we create that desire to want to progress in the arena. And there's two ways to do it. One is get stronger by spending more time in the game, grinding in the game, getting more resources, and making your characters stronger. The other track is obviously spending some money and being able to do it faster. So players are basically spending money to buy time, and the other thing that really worked well for us is kind of the collection mechanic. So our game has Power Rangers IP on our game, and there's over 50 Power Rangers Rangers and villains in the game. And that desire to want to collect all the Rangers and villains in the game also fuels the desire to spend in the game as well.
Our game is essentially freemium as well, but because it's single player, it's a little bit different in that you're not really paying to progress so much as essentially paying for additional time with the game. So think about it almost like the old arcade model where, but we give you, say, 20 free tokens to start playing. And you can play that, and if you're done, you can stop. Or if you want to keep playing, then you can pay to continue to play. So our model is much more simple in that way. There's no sense of kind of trying to power up. It's much more a sense of how long you want to engage with our game. So this is very similar to, say, Candy Crush or any other single-player synchronous game.
So let's talk a little bit about not necessarily the models that your games are following, but what are some of the other models that are having success in the market today, so for people to sort of know what you picked amongst when you settled on the business model that you're following. So like you talked about paying for competition, isn't there also an esports model where you only are paying for things that have an aesthetic value but not a gameplay value? So what other models are there in the market you see?
Yeah, for competitive games, I think there's games like League of Legends, where you cannot really purchase any progression and get stronger that way. It's more of an esports game in that it's they care more about kind of balancing out fairness.
Yeah,
but they can make money through cosmetic and other things like that.
And before people wonder if this can actually work, League of Legends is estimated to be over $1 billion a year game, again, selling primarily only aesthetic things.
Yeah.
So these are not small numbers, they're big.
Yeah. So if you can build up an audience of that size, I think you can make money in many ways.
Yeah. And I think, right, when we were at backstage, you had talked a little bit about the complexity of the model around a game like Minecraft, where the content generated by people playing Minecraft is generating hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising.
Yeah, I think it's the most exciting thing in games, at least to me right now, thinking about how Minecraft, owning the game is a very traditional sort of business model. You go out, you pay, I don't know, $20, $30, I think, for it, and you own it at that point. But when you consider that it's generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year in ad revenue, because nearly everyone who's playing it is either creating content and putting it on YouTube or watching content that's on YouTube, you start to realize that your players are perhaps generating as much value as you are as a developer. That's really exciting. So one way to monetize is through ad revenue in the videos of your game, or sponsorships and things like e-tournaments and things like that.
I think the other interesting thing is UGC, which is user-generated content. In my previous game, APV, there was a very powerful user-generated content engine in there where people can create cards, different characters, different music and all that stuff. And if you have a vibrant community within the game where people can sell things that they've created, and if the game developer or the publisher takes a cut of that transaction, I think that's another interesting model that you can have.
I'd also say kind of an offshoot of this free-to-play model is around random loot boxes. And just to be clear, it's just randomization of what people can get. So they're not just buying specific items, but buying the opportunity to get items. That's been proven time and again to be a huge driver of monetization. You look at games like Overwatch, where a lot of their ongoing revenue after the box sale or the digital sale is through randomization of loot boxes. Clash Royale does the same thing. Hearthstone does the same thing. These are all billion-dollar businesses and almost entirely driven on people buying something, like essentially packs of cards, just like you would buy baseball card packs trying to get that, that rare card every time.
Like Pokemon, right?
Pokemon, same thing. Yep.
I want that EX card, so I'm going to get this until
So I'm
I
going to
get
buy
it.
until I get it.
Yeah. So to give a little context, I think something that people who are outside the industry might not be aware of is the sheer size of the gaming industry. That the famous thing now is that it's bigger than the Hollywood first release movie business, and globally it's a massive industry. And some of these games, some of the big games launch and are $500 million weekends, billion-dollar weekends, and some of these subscription games, some of these other games are now generating hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year. So I think something to talk a little bit about also would be, there's some other models out there. There's subscriptions, there's season pass type models, there's indie games that are low price, or there's full price AAA console games. You said you were hitting in the middle, which I think has seen a resurgence. There was a few years there where we didn't have very many in that range. But how do you match that price point and that business model to your audience? How did you arrive at what was the right fit?
Yeah, I think that When you look at the most traditional model of just selling games outright to customers, for me, a long time, the pricing hasn't made a lot of sense because console games, they're basically all the same price, and that to me that's very strange. That tells you something that they're not priced quite right because, believe me, the cost to make those games. It fluctuates by, 20x, depending on if it's a GTA 5 or a Call of Duty or, some other much smaller title. So to me, for a long time, that whole pricing model just seemed strange. When pricing these kinds of games, if you're making a console game, you're probably going to sell it for $59.99 or something like that. But I think it gets more exciting when you look at things like the PC market, where most games these days are being sold on Steam. And Steam is a marketplace that lets you be very flexible and lets you change your prices on the fly, and you can get feedback and basically analytics on how well your game is doing as you change prices and try to find the sweet spot. I think as a general philosophy, how I would approach pricing is to say, is your game consumable? In that case, if people are going to buy it and play it and be done with it, and you think of it as consumable content, I might think about charging a lot for it because it's not going to be live for very long. You won't have a lot of other opportunities to monetize it. And if it's more like a service that people are going to be playing it for years and years or decades, I might reduce the price and say, I know that I'm going to have other ways to extract value out of it down the road, but really what I probably want to do is just get the most number of people playing it. That's generally how I'd approach it.
Either of you want to add anything?
One thing I was going to say about the free-to-play business model, the benefit I think you see is that, if I can talk about economics a little, is you capture every customer along their willingness to pay along the value curve, right? So if you don't want to pay, that's fine, you can play the game. And the benefit that we have is that the platform is the phone, and everyone has a phone. So everyone can download the app for free, and they can kind of define how much they want to spend, whether that's $0, which is perfectly fine, as long as some people are paying, up to hundreds or thousands of dollars if they really like our game. So essentially, anyone who wants to play will pay exactly what they want to, and not more or less.
So Wright mentioned something that I think might be worth digging into, which is how much does the impact on your pricing based on how you're actually developing the games? So the AAA console model is traditionally a 2 to 3 year longer process that involves predicting the hardware of the future and a lot of factors. Whereas in your game, you said your company has 55 games or more. So how much does that development cycle and the tools that you're using to build your games impact the business design of your game?
I think it varies. I think even for free-to-play games, there are a lot of free-to-play games on PC that take 3 to 5 years to build.
Yeah.
Like APB, for instance, it took 5 years and about $50 to $70 million to build that game. But if a game catches on as a game of a service and the game lasts for 5 to 10 years, like good example is a game like Dungeon Fighter Online, 7 years, every year it just grows. And I think it has grossed more money than Star Wars made on movies, right? So from that perspective, a lot of companies invest a lot of money to develop even free-to-play games. Yeah.
So what are some of the tools that you use to build your games? So what I mean by this is Wright's talking about building a platform, but in the last few years we've seen the rise of Unity, of Unreal, other engines that have really enabled a lot of game development to happen much, much faster and with much less building from scratch all the core components. So what are some of the tools that you're using to build your games?
I mean, for us, we build on Unity, and primarily, kind of like you said, it enables rapid development. There's a lot of classes, a lot of baseline structures that we can build upon, and it's very scalable. It's quick to develop on. It's not too costly. Like, you don't really pay a platform fee. It's more like a rev share. So for all those reasons, Unity has been what we've been using. Another thing that we really focus on is our analytics tool. So there are a number of different analytics platforms you can use, but when you're launching 50 plus games, you constantly need to be tracking the results and be rigorous about which games are performing well and which aren't. Not every game is going to be a hit, and that's fine. When you have 50, it's really survival of the fittest and figuring out which ones are going to make it and investing in those and letting the others kind of go.
The TK, what are you using?
We've used both Unity and Unreal. It seems like those two are the most popular engine these days. It seems like if you have a big budget, and if you're creating a AAA title, and you're really creating like a core experience for the core gamers, a lot of them use Unreal Engine 4 just for better realism and just more high fidelity in the graphics. But Unity has caught up a lot in terms of what the game looks like, and it's a lot more affordable than Unreal, so Unity has become more popular. Also, if you're targeting multiple devices, then Unity is a much better choice, I feel like. If you know exactly what platform you're targeting, then Unreal could be a good choice as well.
And Wright?
Yeah, to build the game that we're building, we're using Unreal, and I really can't overstate just how revolutionary the availability of all these game engines has been. 10 years ago, your choices were, there were a couple of game engines out there that you could license, and you'd pay millions and millions of dollars to license these engines, and so the barrier of entry was high. So there were a lot of people out there writing game engines from scratch, which, trust me, you don't want to do unless you really know what you're doing. Not only does Unreal and Unity and things like CryEngine make it really easy for you to just sort of get up and running quickly, but they also have things like asset stores where you can, if you're just an engineer and you want to build a game and you need some art, well, for $50 or $100, you can go get some fantastic art that basically just plug right into the game. And that, I think, has been revolutionary in allowing people to focus on building innovative ideas and not getting bogged down and just reinventing the wheel and trying to write all this code and build all this art that's required just to get a basic game running.
That's a good point. I mean, Unity now has analytics tool. It's got like an ad system in there, and it's got
Yeah, and I think to clarify, one thing that's important to note is that many of these platforms are now essentially free to start with, and you are just doing a rev share. So the platforms have been aligned to the business models of their customers in a way that's very revolutionary. So I think very quickly, I just have two more questions. We're almost at the end of our time. The first question is, where do you see things going? I mean, obviously, Wright, you want to see, you have a vision for the future for your game, but where do you see games going in the next few years?
Well, I think mobile space, I know that it's been continuing to grow, but even as the mobile market starts to flatten out, there's still a lot of opportunities in mobile. More and more areas are having better Wi-Fi connections or just better, cellular connections. So the devices are more powerful, and it's really the platform that literally everyone in this room has that. Not everyone in this room necessarily has a PC that can play games or a Nintendo Switch. That being said, the games on the mobile devices need to continue to get better, right? We can't keep just making the same match 3 games, the same those types of games. We need to come up with the killer app will be whatever the next mobile game will be.
Yeah, I feel a similar way. Just a sheer number of install base out there for mobile and how they're becoming more and more powerful. I don't think it's going away. And the fact that there hasn't been too much innovation or new experiences on mobile, a lot of it, I think because of the risks involved, a lot of the games that have come out have been in very similar repeat genres. I think there can be a lot of innovation that can happen and different type of user experiences that games can bring on mobile and PC platforms. I think what you guys are doing is a good example. So maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that I think is shaping the games industry is the fact that there's something like 700 million people who play games online right now, and I think there was a report from SuperData that came out a couple weeks ago that said that there are now something like 650 million people watching games. So I look at that trend, and then I look at the trend of kids. Kids under the age of 18 don't watch TV anymore. They don't care about TV. They want to be on their devices, playing games like Minecraft, creating material, sharing it with their friends, watching their friends play. So I see the future of games being one where people are content creators, and they're also content consumers. And that because we start to see people being content creators and consumers, I think that we might also start to see a trend where we think of certain kinds of devices as being the devices where people create and people and other devices where people are consuming. So I'm placing my bet on the PC being the killer content creation device, one where people aren't just making the software, but people have these rigs where they're putting on shows as streamers and as content creators, and perhaps we'll see the emergence of mobile devices as sort of windows into those performances. That's my bet. We'll see if I'm right.
Okay, so this is a panel on games, so I have to end on. Sure. We can take one quick question, yeah?
So I was looking at Pokemon Go, and the user dropped it, right? So what do you guys do from maintaining the user?
Okay, so the question is, I'll just repeat. The question is looking at Pokemon Go and droppage in users, although I don't know, I think it's a bit overstated perhaps. How do you retain your users?
Well, the most important thing for retaining users is definitely being able to continuously put in content and doing very frequent updates to the game, so that when the users come back to the game, there's always something fresh and new. And if the users know that the developer is putting something out every week or every 2 weeks, they have the anticipation and less likely to leave. If you have the mentality of, okay, I'm going to develop the game, launch it, and I'm kind of done, then you will see that drop off fairly quickly. And also having a very good live operations and not, like, I remember Pokemon Go at the beginning had a lot of server problems and it didn't work for a lot of people. Those kind of things can really, kill your DAU as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think retention is like one of the #1 things that all mobile publishers, developers need to look at. It's expensive to acquire users. It's more expensive when they drop off and you can never find them again. I think, to your point, making the game feel fresh, constantly adding new content, new events, making sure that every time they come back, there's something new to do. Pokemon Go is a great example. Like, I played it, but then after 2 weeks, I was kind of like, okay, I'm doing the same thing over and over. There's nothing else to do. And they lost me. I didn't play anymore. There's probably new stuff in it that I haven't seen, but I just don't play it.
All right, so this leads me into my final question, and then we're going to wrap up this and move on to the next, which is, what are the games that you're actually playing? What's the last thing that you played yourself that wasn't your own game?
On mobile, I still play Clash Royale every day. I love that game. And on console, I just finished Horizon Zero Dawn, which is amazing.
I'm a big Clash Royale fan as well, because we're making a real-time synchronous game. I think they were the first one to do real-time synchronous game. I love all the Supercell game, Clash of Clans, even the Heyday is something that I used to play as well.
I've been spending a lot of my time playing PC games. There are a lot of e-sport style survival games out, like H1Z1, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. I'm still a big fan of the MOBAs like Dota, League of Legends, and games like Counter-Strike. As I get older, I have a lot more interest in playing games as sort of an investment in gaining skill, rather than as a way to sort of consume content. So that's what I've been gravitating towards.
So just let me quickly follow on. Two quick things. One, can you explain to anyone who's wondering what is a MOBA? And two, do you find yourself playing games by yourself, or do you play games with other people?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many games that, I mean, most of the mobile games so far have been single-player experiences. You're constantly playing by yourself. And the best game experience I've had, growing up, and it's been multiplayer games where whether it's a fighting game or whether it's an action game, you're playing with other people in real time, whether you're at home or arcade, right? So I think mobile will, continue to go into that direction because it's an untapped area. It's just a lot more. You get more emotion involved when you're either playing with someone or you're playing against somebody, and that's a human being at the other end.
And could someone just explain for the audience what's a MOBA?
It's multiplayer online battle arena. So like League of Legends, Dota 2, Dota, Heroes of New Earth, many. Heroes of the Storm. Why didn't I say that one? Mine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to thank the panel. Again, this was Brian Chu, TK Kim, and Wright Bagwell.